Thank you for the invitation and having me here. I've been following this format, and I think that's one of the very few advantages of the pandemic is that we have lots of great online formats. So even if we haven't been seeing each other in person, it's nice to get together and here. So I'm really excited to talk to you about this project, and we're still quite early in the grant or in the project, and I'm actually going to present the first empirical results today. So I've been talking about this for quite a while in terms of an idea, but today I have some results. So just as a brief outline, so I want to just give you the background that you probably all know, that we live in a metrics culture where everything likes to get measured. There's a lot of pressure to publish. And then I want to talk about what we define as metrics literacies and how we want to use this as a methodology to actually reduce the misuse of quantitative indicators in science and in scholarship. And then the last part really focuses on this study. We just published a preprint 2 weeks ago. The data set is also available. And yeah, I'm going to show you what we found there. So to give you a background, we know that researchers are under a lot of pressure to publish because, unfortunately, the number of publications, particularly in prestigious journals, are still making and breaking some researchers' careers, or most of our careers. So there's a lot of pressure to publish. Unfortunately, the indicators that are being used to measure this, although there's quite a variety developed in the bibliometrics community and used in that community, the ones that are most often used are very simple and flawed indicators that are applied to assess the researcher's quality and impact, and that often determines things like hiring, tenure, and promotion. So you all kind of know the news that we always hear about simple indicators being used, and that they're often also optimized in a certain sense that might even lead to things like citation cartels, or a lot of misuse of these flawed indicators. And if you just look around on the internet, people are really obsessed with the HIndex too. And the HIndex is used in a lot of contexts to determine if somebody should maybe win a prize, get hired, or just to filter out from a lot of applicants. So we really have a problem with a lot of different indicators, but this project now, as a kind of focusing on one indicator, tries to apply metrics literacies to the HIndex. So what we think we need is that we really need to improve the way in which metrics are used in academia. And there are some available resources already. So Dora is doing a really great job in attracting a lot of people from all different fields and trying to improve how we assess researchers, first starting with basically saying that we shouldn't be using the impact factor to assess individual researchers, but Dora has been doing a lot more and trying to redefine how we assess research. And there's also a great website called the Metrics Toolkit, and they're trying to bring together the state-of-the-art knowledge about different indicators so that people can go there and can kind of find out what indicators mean and how they can and shouldn't be applied. And there's lots of literature, of course. So we have the Leiden Manifesto that reached a really big audience, actually, and I think it was one of the first documents that kind of broke out of the bibliometrics community and reached academia or research evaluators in general. We also have great books. So for example, by Ronald Rousseau, the one on becoming metric wise, or by Cassidy Sugimoto and Vincent Larivière on measuring research, that are focused on people, explaining people from academia that don't particularly have a bibliometrics background on what different metrics are. But what all these resources have in common, that they're text-based. And we all know that scholars are already really overwhelmed and they have way too much to read in their own field. So why should we assume that they also spend a lot of time in educating themselves about bibliometrics or scholiometrics? And there's one type of media that actually is very efficient to explain very complex topics to a general audience in a very effective format, and that is video, because you're using audio and visual, the audio and the visual channel together. And there are lots of examples on YouTube, for example, minute physics that explain extremely complex topics to a general audience. So why are we not applying this to scholarly metrics? So that's why we came up with the metrics literacies concept, and we define it as an integrated set of competencies, dispositions, and knowledge that empower individuals to recognize, interpret, critically assess, and effectively and ethically use scholarly metrics. And we want to basically improve scholarly metrics, and we really want to investigate and analyze how we can do that best. So the goal of our project is to improve the understanding and the appropriate use of scholarly metrics in academia. We want to do this by developing educational resources, particularly video, because it has this two-channel approach. And we're actually going to do a randomized control trial to experimentally test what kind of video format, because there are plenty, is best to educate academics, researchers, and research administrators to improve their metrics literacy and ultimately to reduce the misuse. And then after we have tested which kind of video format is best and most effective, we want to distribute these materials, these videos, as open educational resources using a CC BY license, so that this information can spread and lots of people can learn from it. So just as this is the framework of our project, and you also see the people that are currently involved. So we're quite a big team. We're using the knowledge to action framework, and you see that, you know, we're building everything based on the bibliometrics literature, including the metrics toolkit, and condensing what we already know about metrics into the open educational resources. And right now we're in phase 1 still. So we're still trying to select the best format before we actually produce the videos and then test them in the randomized control trial. And we also have a qualitative angle of our project. So we're going to do in-depth interviews after. And the last phase will be to distribute those. So I'm not doing this alone. I have a really great team behind me. Some of them, I think I saw Carrie is also here today. So we actually have bibliometrics expertise, but we also have a cinema professor, we have YouTubers, we have podcast hosts and data visualization experts. And then we also have a great team of people that are, whose background is science communication. So yeah, this is basically what we're trying to do over the next 3 years. And the main part of the randomized control trial basically checks previous knowledge of participants about the HIndex. So this particular project focuses on one metric. This doesn't mean that we think that is the only metric we should analyze, but we're starting with one because of the randomized control trial, keeping the variable of content constant here. So what we want to test, we have the control text, because written text is the main form to communicate in academia. And then we have 3 different video formats that we want to test against the control. So they are the treatment. And then after having exposed researchers from all different disciplines and career stages, we again have an attitude survey and knowledge test after to kind of see which format was most effective. So this is all based on bibliometric literature on the HIndex. So we have created what we call an HIndex briefing note, and it basically captures what the HIndex is, the formula and computation, that it actually lacks a clear concept, that its inability to assess early career researchers, lack of field normalization, that there are differences between databases, and then also its popularity and uninformed use. So basically, we're trying to capture everything that we think is relevant about the HIndex into this briefing note, which functions as the control, and also the basis on which we're going to produce the videos. We're actually using personas. So based on the literature, we found that it's advantageous in educational formats to have a so-called focalizer, so a person that people can identify with. And so far we've created 5 personas. We're also thinking about adding a librarian in here because we think they play a really important role. And we're trying to be very diverse in terms of career stage. So we have everything from a PhD student to a dean. pre-tenure and tenure professor and a postdoc, different countries and different disciplines, so that we can all kind of like capture the nuances of diverse backgrounds of what that indicator is used and how important it is. So we're using this kind of storytelling approach. So not just delivering the facts, but helping people that watch the video to identify with the issues that our personas have. And so we, for example, have our postdoc in biotech, Maryam from Iran. She's 34, and she thinks that the HIndex is actually quite confusing. She doesn't really know what it means at all. And she also thinks that it's not fair to reduce a researcher to a single number. She believes that she doesn't need dozens of articles to be a good researcher. She actually saw that on her Google Scholar profile, her HIndex was 2, and it's so low because she has only published 3 journal articles so far, and her most recent one has only been cited once. In her opinion, her low HIndex does not reflect her scientific impact because it does not show the success of her first authored paper, which according to Google Scholar was cited 291 times. So this is a fictive example, but we want to kind of capture the issues that real life researchers could have from all different fields and cultural backgrounds. So what we think we need to do is that we need to educate researchers and research administrators about scholarly metrics, because that knowledge is just not there. And we think that storytelling and personas can help to draw attention to open educational resources and help increase retention about the topic. And audiovisual OERs, so videos, are most efficient and effective, or more efficient and effective than text. So that's why we think we should focus on that. So that's kind of the idea of the whole project. Now I want to go into and show you some of the empirical results. So we haven't produced any videos yet, but we're kind of at the stage where we want to have a lay of the land and see what kind of resources are already out there. And there are lots of HIndex videos on YouTube. So that's what we investigated. So this study we did from last summer to very recently. We just published the preprint, and the objective of this was to really assess the landscape of educational videos about the HIndex that already exist. And we wanted to characterize and understand available resources, and then also provide recommendations of gaps, like what's not done so well or what is missing for our video production and also other future educational initiatives. So there are actually lots of videos if you just search for HIndex on YouTube. Obviously, we couldn't watch them all. So we had a code book. We found 274 videos on YouTube, but we had some exclusion criteria. So we excluded everything that wasn't in English because most of our team, or that's one common language. We also argue that it's the language that reaches most people. We also didn't include videos that were longer than 10 minutes because we know the literature is telling us that it's really hard to pay attention, and it's best to have short videos. I think around 6 or 7 minutes is the ideal length that the literature says, but so that's why we exclude anything that is longer than 10 minutes. And we also excluded videos that weren't about the HIndex. So even though we looked for the keyword HIndex and videos were found like that, there were quite a few that didn't really address the indicator. So in the end, out of the 274, we coded 31 that met the inclusion criteria. And we basically also applied saturation. So we kept seeing the same thing. So it was 31 videos that we coded completely. They were viewed by at least 2 authors. And that was done, they were viewed by at least 2 authors completely, but almost all of us watched all videos. And the coding was done independently by 2 authors as well. And then any discrepancies in the coding, we at the end resolved as a group. So we had a code book with, I think it's 50 variables overall. There are 9 that focus on the video metadata. So this is mostly information that came from YouTube. How long is the video? What's the title? What channel is it posted on, and so on. Then the inclusion exclusion criteria for us was language. And then we have information about the type of video. So like there are talking head types where somebody like me right now is explaining to you, but there are also animated videos. where you don't see a person, but you see an animation. There are interviews where somebody's interviewing an expert on the topic. So we coded them into different types. We also had some information about who the instructor were. So quite a few of those videos were produced by researchers themselves. There were also a lot of librarians. Yeah, so we coded that. And then we had 10 different categories that kind of addressed the shortcomings of the HIndex or did not address. So we checked for example, if they addressed that an HIndex shouldn't be compared across disciplines, that there is this disadvantage for early career researchers because it's size dependent, so it depends on the number of publications. So we checked if those things were addressed in the videos. And then we also applied cognitive load theory, and I'll show you in the example and the result what that actually means. But basically, cognitive load theory helps us to check whether the way in which the topic is explained and how the video is produced actually helps the learner. So basically, you want to reduce things like extraneous cognitive load. For example, if there's background noise, if my dog was barking now, that is something that distracts you from the content and from learning. So we checked whether the videos had extraneous cognitive load. We also checked for germane load and intrinsic load, and I'll show you in a second what that means. And then we had a little bit of additional information where we really just commented on anything specific. So this is the codebook. The data, by the way, is published on Zenodo, so the link is down here. If you access the link I shared earlier from Zenodo for the slides today, you can also see that we have a Zenodo community page and all our outputs are there. So that was the codebook. And now for the results, we first looked at video content. So we obviously wanted to know what are they talking about? And we checked if the 31 videos, did they actually define the HIndex? Did they say how it was calculated and what it actually is? And actually most of the videos, so 26 out of 31, that's 84%, define the HIndex. Some of them provided a fictional example of an HIndex. So just saying like, for example, if an author's HIndex is 10, this means. Others actually provided a real example. So often they took themselves and said my HIndex is and looked themselves up on Google Scholar. 16%, so that's just over half of the videos, also mentioned other impact indicators. So we focused on videos that were focused on the HIndex, but half of them also mentioned other bibliometric indicators. 12 videos, so that's 39%, actually refer to the inventor, Hirsch, the physicist who invented the HIndex. And then content-wise, most videos, so 71%, this is the 22 here, actually showed you how do you get an HIndex or your HIndex. So they showed you resources, how you could locate it. And among the databases that were mentioned, Google Scholar was the most popular. We also specifically, I told you we looked at the caveats because, well, I think many of us here share the opinion that the HIndex is not a great bibliometric indicator and has lots of flaws. And we really wanted to see, do the videos bring that across? Do they mention any shortcomings, any problems? And overall, 16, so that's 52% of the videos mentioned some problems with the HIndex. So didn't just take it for, you know, a great way to show an impact or the quality of a researcher, which was first proclaimed by Hirsch that it would do that. And then more specifically, 39%, so that's the 12 here, mentioned that you shouldn't be comparing HIndexes across disciplines. And this is something that is not specific to the HIndex, of course. A lot of bibliometric indicators that I used very frequently, for example, the impact factor or just the sheer number of publications and citations, they are different between disciplines. And so you shouldn't be comparing a researcher from math with somebody from biomed with somebody from the humanities. And that was addressed in 39% of the videos. 9 of the videos also mentioned that there's actually not one HIndex, but based on the database you're using, Google Scholar, Web of Science, and so on, or, you know, a manual calculation if you want to, your H-index will have it is different. So it really makes sense to mention where you got your H-index from and also when you calculated it, because obviously the more publications and the more citations are in the database, the higher the H-index is. 7 of the videos, so that's only 23%, so less than a quarter, actually mentioned that it shouldn't be used for early career researchers, because we know that the H-index can always just go up. So that means that early career researchers who haven't had the time to publish lots and to get cited a lot can also not have a high H-index. So if you're using this particularly for hiring decisions or also for academic prizes, it's problematic if you compare somebody who's been working on in the field for 30 years to somebody who's only been around for 5 years or so. And then there were some other smaller things that were or were not addressed. So for example, that you could increase an H-index by citing yourself a lot, or that it doesn't cover author order, for example. Those were the things that were mentioned in 3 videos. And then we looked at cognitive load theory. So really trying to assess for us the way the video is produced. So not so much the content, but the type of video and the way it's presented. Does it actually help people to learn? So this is really important about, retaining information, but focusing on, can you really take everything in that the presenter is telling you or the video is showing? So there are 3 categories: extraneous cognitive load, intrinsic cognitive load, and germane cognitive load. And we had several variables for each of those. So extraneous cognitive load means that it's actually requiring cognitive processing. So you have to take it in a sense, but it doesn't relate to what you're supposed to learn. So that's usually non-productive distractions, for example, background noise. So we had one video, for example, there was, I don't know what it was, but maybe a clock ticking very loudly in the background. So that distracts you and has nothing to do, or my dog barking, nothing to do with the content, and it distracts you from the actual content. So we want to reduce extraneous cognitive load, for example. Intrinsic cognitive load is basically the inherent difficulty of the task. So you cannot do a lot about, like if you're teaching a very complex topic, that's what it is, and it has this intrinsic cognitive load, but you can reduce it a little bit in the way that you present. So for example, segmenting, so basically breaking down content into smaller things and basically telling the audience where you are at, right? That you're like, I have these things I want to talk to you about. Now I'm talking about the first one. That helps to reduce the intrinsic cognitive load a little bit, so that it's easier to follow. So we want to see that, there are things in the videos that help to reduce this intrinsic cognitive load. Germane cognitive load refers to cognitive resources that your brain kind of needs to use to facilitate learning. And you can really enhance this by presenting content multimodally. So using the dual channel approach, which means at the same time that I'm talking to you and explaining something, so using the audio channel, you're hearing it, I'm also showing you things, for example, here on my slide, or this is even better, if you have an animation and showing certain processes, you're highlighting something. So this multimodal, this is why we're picking videos in the first place, as we think it's a very effective and efficient format. But we particularly check the videos of like, are the presenters making use of that? Is the video doing this? Is it, while it explains something, using the audio channel, also highlighting it visually? So for the results for that, for the 3 different categories, we had 17 videos, and this is 55%, so just over half, that had extraneous elements, and that's what we want to reduce. That's for example, background noise. A poor audio quality can be very distracting, or oral cues where somebody's saying to someone else, go to next slide. Go to next slide. So if you're producing an educational video, you want to avoid these things. And we actually found that more than half of those videos though had those extraneous elements that you want to avoid. Then there's some things that are actually positive for extraneous load. For example, directly addressing the viewer. So speaking to the audience. The examples that we saw here with people saying, presenters saying, first of all, you must log in, or I hope you can see, and so on. So 13, so this is around 40%, I think, actually addressed the viewer, so that was great. And signaling can also help. So if you want to point to something really important on the screen, you can use an arrow or magnification or some sorts, and six of the videos, of the 31 videos, use that. In terms of intrinsic cognitive load, so I said this is what's really associated with, you know, you can't really do anything about it. If the topic is really complex, then there is a high intrinsic cognitive load, but you can improve the situation, reduce the burden. So one thing that we found that actually a lot of the videos, so 22 of the 31 did pretty well, is timing of content. So if there was anything on the slide that should be read, there was enough time to do so. Segmenting is another very simple way to reduce intrinsic cognitive load. So basically saying, now I'm telling you about the advantages and disadvantages, or we're going to talk about the following 3 topics and so on. 5 videos also provided additional resources. So that could be like, hey, you can reach out to me if you have any questions, or providing links at the end of the video. Germane cognitive load, again, signaling actually was very present. So 28 of the 31 videos, so almost all of them, provided some kind of signaling. So for example, saying in this example, you can see, or using your hands, even if you're visible. Dual channels, so really emphasizing something, for example, having animated text while you speak about it, having voiceover, that was actually present in 71% of the videos. So that was actually pretty good. And only one video had some interactive learning elements. So they had this question to the viewer to say, now let me see if you can solve this exercise. So this was 1 out of the 31 videos, although we really know that active learning or interactive elements can really make it easier for retention and for the audience to be involved. So this is kind of what we found in terms of the cognitive load. So just to sum up the results from this study, although most videos actually define what the HIndex is, 22% did not. So they didn't even explain what the indicator was about, although the video was about the HIndex. Also, almost half of them did not mention that this indicator has any caveats. So 61% of the videos did not address that there are disciplinary differences and that you shouldn't be comparing researchers' HIndexes across disciplines. And also 77% did not mention that there's an issue applying the HIndex to early career researchers. So this is the content part. We think there's lots to be improved, and that especially bibliometric experts or bibliometricians are needed here to improve the quality of the videos. In terms of not the content, but the quality of how the video is produced, we actually found that 68% of these videos had this kind of amateurish production quality. So obviously we double coded, but it's still a bit of subjectivity here, but it came across as not being very professional. In terms of cognitive load, actually videos did very well because 90% used signaling to limit germane load, and 71% used the dual channel approach to limit germane load. 42% addressed the viewer directly, which actually helps to keep attention. But 55% included these non-productive distractions like background noise, like I have right now. And only 3%, that's 1 video, used active learning. So we still think that video is a very efficient, effective, and also engaging format to educate researchers and research administrators about scholarly metrics. But we need to, and we're really excited to do this, to test the effectiveness of various video formats in a randomized control trial. So that's what we're getting into, producing the three treatments of 3 different video formats now. And this study has actually helped us to come up with a good list of do's and don'ts. So the available resources that we looked at about the HIndex use elements of to balance cognitive load. So that's actually a good thing, but most of them have a very amateurish appearance. So it's not, a lot of them have destructive elements, so it's not that much of a pleasure to watch them. And what I think is the most problematic is that they lack critical reflections on the inconsistencies and the usefulness of the HIndex. So what we think needs to be done in the future is that we need to produce more of these educational videos, open educational resources, and they need to involve the bibliometric experts that know enough about the metric to be critical about it and to reflect on the pros and cons. We also need online education specialists to help us produce an effective video. And we need video producers in the end to have a professional resource that you know, puts everything together and is also fun and engaging to watch. So this is a quick overview of the Metrics Literacies project. I'm really looking forward to what you think about it. If you have any suggestions, yeah, if you actually have, you know, questions about what we're doing, what next steps are. So thank you very much. Slides are available on Zenodo. I think I posted the link in the slide in the chat as well, and I'm looking forward to your questions.